Joining me now, the Commissioner of the Federal Election Commission, Ellen Weintraub. Last night, she took the unprecedented step of releasing the following statement, quote, "Let me make something 100% clear to the American public and anyone running for public office. It is illegal for any person to solicit, accept, or receive anything of value from a foreign national in connection with the U.S. election. It's not a novel concept. Any political campaign that receives an offer of a prohibited donation from a foreign source should report that offer to the Federal Bureau of Investigation." Ellen, tell me, I guess, how settled is this? Are we in like a gray area of the law here, or is this fairly clear to your mind?
No, it's pretty clear to my mind, but since it did not appear to be clear to everybody, I thought it was a good idea to clarify it.
What does federal law prohibit? Tell me more.
Federal law plainly prohibits anyone in the United States from soliciting, accepting, receiving anything of value from a foreign national in connection with a U.S. election. That's federal, state, local elections, and it can be anything of value. Of course, we are particularly concerned if the thing of value might be coming from a foreign government, because that is the thing that our founders at the very beginning of our country were most concerned about when it came to foreign influence. And
thing of value, I think, is sort of a weird and somewhat nebulous concept. Obviously, it is flatly illegal and obviously illegal if a foreign government were to write you a $100,000 check, or you had a bunch of straw donors who were foreign cutouts, which is actually something that someone pled guilty to vis-a-vis the president's inauguration. Flatly illegal. Does like a bunch of information on your opponent count as a thing of value?
The law was written that way to be as broad as possible. When anything of value comes after a laundry list of other things that are specified in the law, and then there's this catch-all term, anything of value, to make sure that indeed anything of any value is going to be covered by the law.
So I want to read you something that Susan Collins said today, and she was talking about Mark Warner's proposed legislation that would essentially mandate FBI reporting of such overtures, and why she was objecting to it. This is Senate legislation. I'm not asking you to weigh in on this, but this is her objection. Collins also told me Mark Warner's legislation requiring reporting to FBI of offers of campaign assistance from foreign government agents is overly broad. She said Canada shouldn't be in the same category as Russia. My question to you is, from the standpoint of federal election law, is there any difference between Canada and Russia?
Well, there actually isn't, and it's funny that she should mention Canada, and I like Canada.
Who doesn't?
So I don't want to. Who doesn't like Canada?
Congratulations to the Raptors.
But the leading principle, the leading case on this subject, actually concerns a Canadian, someone who is living and working in this country. It's the Blumen case. The decision was handed down and written by then Judge Brett Kavanaugh, now Justice Kavanaugh, who is no shirker when it comes to calling out campaign finance laws that he doesn't like. But when it came to analyzing the prohibition against foreign nationals, including Canadians, from making any kind of contribution, donation of anything of value in connection with a U.S. election, he said, we don't look at this the same way we would look at most campaign finance questions, because this is a question of national sovereignty. This is a question of who is part of our United States political community who gets to participate in choosing our elected officials. And Canadians, they don't count.
Right. So I guess the question is, from federal law standpoint, good information, bad information, ally or adversary, it's just a flat prohibition. If you're running for office and you're getting anything offered to you or soliciting anything, a briefing book, help renting a banquet hall for a fundraiser, any of that from foreign nationals, and particularly foreign governments or cutouts thereof, that's just flatly illegal.
Yep.
Okay. Who enforces that?
Well, we have civil enforcement authority at the FEC, and the Justice Department has criminal enforcement authority if it's a knowing and willful violation.
So what does that mean? My general sense is that people are not, how can I put this politely since you're head of the FEC, they're not staying up at night in cold sweats worrying about the FEC.
I've heard.
I mean that in no way to disrespect your work. I just mean that there's a very big difference between looking at a civil penalty from the FEC and, prison time.
Absolutely. I would be more afraid of prison time than of a fine from the FEC. But I should point out that when it comes to foreign national contributions, this is the rare issue on which the FEC actually is capable of speaking with one voice. Recently, we had a case that involved one of the largest penalties that the FEC has managed to collect in a very long time. It was almost $1 million, and it involved foreign national spending in our elections. And we had a unanimous decision on that. It was almost $1 million penalty.
That's interesting because generally the FEC is quite deadlocked, and it's meant that enforcement can be very difficult. No, I mean, enforcement can be very difficult to come by. I think it's 3 and 3 commissioners, right? You guys are 3 from each party. Often you split. It's hard to come to consensus. But you're saying that from Judge Brett Kavanaugh sitting on a court to the bipartisan members of the Federal Election Commission, this is one area of campaign finance law which has been under sustained ideological and judicial attack for years. This is one area that's like black letter law, red line, everyone agrees, no, no, no.
It certainly should be. That is my experience, and I know that there have been several laws that have been introduced in Congress, and I would urge every member of Congress to take the same attitude and to join together in a bipartisan fashion, because there is nothing more serious than an attack on our democracy from a foreign adversary.
All right, Ellen Weintraub of the FEC, which does great work. Let me just be very clear. Enforcing our campaign finance laws as they're under assault left and right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.